Are you looking for your next bag making challenge? This could very well be it. This is my latest pattern. Hi, I'm Jill. Welcome to my channel. So this is Alla-Jay. She comes in 2 sizes, 2 variations, and these are 2 separate patterns because the construction is quite different for both. This is the flap option, the medium and the small. And when I say this is a challenge, it's because this baby and this baby are small. Look how small they are. Now, as you can see, there's quite a bit of difference between the 2 sizes. Now, the small is quite tight to sew, and I've set that at an intermediate sew, just because you need to be aware of the fabric choices and your fabric handling skills, because it's quite a tight sew. And please don't make it out of anything heavy, because you're going to have a really big struggle turning it. Can you sew this little baby? If not, just jump straight through to the medium size, which is the perfect size for a daily handbag or an evening bag. It has 2 handle options, the sew on or the pull up. Now this just pulls up and can just slide back down inside for when you're using the shoulder strap. So that is our flat version. What about the zipper? Now this is a little bit different. No zipper tab here, and still full access to the top of the bag. Now these come in either a sectional front or the plain front like this. And the plain front was designed so that you could do a little bit of quilting or dress it up with any kind of funkiness you want to. So I'll be making this bag today. And if you want to check out me making this little one, I will put the link to that up here. So guys, grab a pattern, and if you like what you see today, please do comment, like, share, and subscribe, because I do make content like this with my patterns, and I'm also starting some live sewing. So lots of fun. Let's get on with the tutorial for this baby now. So I'm going to make the medium flap option. So this is everything we need to make that. Now the trim. Now I do talk about the trim. This is very, very thin vinyl. Now I suggest using thin fabric, ribbon, anything like that, because it is adding that to the normal top stitch. So you don't want anything too thick, and you want it just to be a nice trim between the 2 layers. We need 2 D-rings. Now I suggest as small as possible, because we want those to hide inside the strap so that we can use the handle. We've got the handle. I'm going with the sew-on handle. Now because this is so thin, I've actually added a little bit of fleece down the middle of mine in preparation to make it, because I don't want it just to be a thin handle. Then I have my strap. We have our 2 sides. Now this is very thin, as I mentioned. It's a faux leather, like it's really thin. So I've added medium weight interfacing and Deckerville light out of the seam allowances. They are the 2 sides. You need 2 of those. The same with the front sides, the A2, again, interfacing and Deckerville light out of the seam allowances. The centre, now this is for the sectional front. If you're doing the plain front, you would have a different piece. So these 2 pieces make up the front. And again, out of the seam allowance, and mark your centres on those. This is the back. Again, Deckerville out of the seam allowances, and we should mark our front or our centres on all of these. This is my slip pocket, G1. I have 2, and I've interfaced those with light. The slip pocket trim, G2, you need 1 of those, very light again, the same as what you use for the trim. And my lining, I'm using a cotton, so I have gone with a medium weight interfacing on the back. Actually, it's a bit of a heavier interfacing, this one, and I've taken it out of my seam allowance at the top, because you don't want anything extra in the top. Now this is the flap. Now, I am doing them both in exterior fabric. So if you do this as well, don't get them mixed up, because one is cut to the line at on the pattern and the other one is full. Now I've cut my interfacing down because we don't want any extra in that, and the Deckerville is the same as the pattern piece. Then we have our strap connectors. Something nice and light is good for those, because I want these straps to be able to be taken off and not have the connectors in the way, because it can be just a nice little handle bag. And this is the base. Now I haven't used any interfacing, I've just used Deckerville heavy on that. So that is all the pieces we need. So I'm going to go and just work through all the preparations. Because I'm using the sectional front, I will start. Now the other thing we need to do with our sectional front is mark the lines as per the pattern. So I shall go and have a line here on our pattern. The reason we've got that is we want to line that up at the top. And we're going to sew down to where that line is. So stop at the line, turn it around towards us and cut a notch to the line. So that is got a cut in it. Then we can bring that around to line up with the bottom like that and continue sewing. And the same with the other side. Start at the bottom and sew up to your line. Turn it to the front, make your snip. So you're just snipping in the A2 to your needle so that you can just bring that around and line it up to the top and keep sewing. So now with that open, I'm just going to snip that other layer. So you've got a V in both like that underneath. Now you're not coming to your seam or just shy of it. What we want to do now this is entirely up to you, but I think it looks best if these are, and we shall open that up. So now I'm going to top stitch down both sides. Now I'm going to use about a 4, just under a 5, about a 5 top stitch. And I'm going to do that at a generous 3mm. So that there should be the same size as our back. So we'll put that aside for now. The piece for the strap connectors, we need our H and we need our D-rings. Now this is designed that you cut it, fold it in half and cut it for that for a non-fraying fabric and cut it for that for a fraying. It actually doesn't matter. I would suggest, it's more about thickness. I would suggest cutting it at half. The reason being they are very small and they are tucked down well in the bag. So I'm going to cut this at half. Like that, but if you're using quilting cotton, I would probably cut it at the full width. So now we want to put a piece of double-sided tape down the middle. And we want to fold our ends into the middle. Like that. Now, yes, we do cut this in half, and yes, it is very little. That is the plan. I just put a clip on those for now. So if you don't put double-sided tape on it, you can sew down either side, and I do suggest sewing down it in the pattern. And I want to baste the edge up 12mm or 1/2 inch from the bottom. So now I'm going to just keep those together and put them aside. So then we want our strap and our top handle. I will do the top handle first. So as you can see, I've put a little bit of fleece underneath, and I have, because I haven't interfaced this at all. So what I'm going to do, I've put double-sided tape over the fleece, because I'm going to put that into the middle. Like that. And we take our trim piece or our contrast, put a piece of double-sided tape down the middle. Now you don't have to use double-sided tape. You could glue it, you could clip it, you can do whatever you want. I just find it easier on tutorials to hold everything in place so that I can just get on and with what's important. So now you want to line this up exactly halfway. Now I'm doing it over the top of the join. Like that. So now we're going to sew down each edge with a 6mm seam allowance. So So give those a trim or just a snip along the bottom or the edge. Now there's a couple of ways of doing this so it's nice and even on the other side. You can either edge coat, cut this shorter and edge coat, or you can turn that under like that. So I'm actually going to trim this, and so I'm going to clip that or cut that nice and evenly along the edge. Swap here. And I shall stick that there to dry. So while that is drying, we shall work on our handle, on our strap. Now I'm doing the rolled shoulder strap. Now you can put on any kind of strap you want, but this is the strap. So what I'm going to do with the shoulder strap is I am going to put a piece of double-sided tape down the middle. Now I'm not going to mark this, I'm just going to eyeball it, because we're actually not just folding this in later, we are folding it to a 3, believe it or not. So we'll fold this into the middle. Fold this aside into meat. So like that. Now we're not sewing anything yet. What we want to do is fold that over and then that over there. So folding it and then that over there and clip it down there. So it's folding it in 3. Now I do like this strap with the pull-up handle, but I decided to do the sew-on handle on this version. So I can show you how that works. It's easier on the table so that you can get some pressure down on it. Don't bring it past, like over the edge, just keep it on there a little bit. So you're just in there. So you're not going to be sewing in the middle, you're going to be sewing a little bit past it so that you're catching both edges in your seam. I will trim the end later. Now when you're sewing it, you just do need to make sure you catch both edges. If you've got a thicker vinyl and it has a raw edge that you can leave raw, you could cut this in half and just do it as a triple, or you could edge coat and do that, because you don't want this to be really thick for it to be comfortable, you want it to be quite flexible. Okay, so now we are going to sew so that we're just a couple of mils on this side of that join, so then we will catch that join as well because it's underneath, and just sew one seam down the middle. So that is your strap, just like that. Now if you've got a nice contrast on your thread, that looks quite cool. So we'll put that aside for now. So now we're going to work on our 2 flap pieces. We want to draw a line 1/4 of an inch from the straight edge. Sorry, 1/2 inch from the straight edge, I'll get it right, which should be where your interfacing comes to. Do that on both of them. Now on this one it will be different. It's still 1/2 inch, but it won't come to the edge. Now we want to put some double-sided tape on the very edge. It can either go up against the line or along the edge, whichever's easiest for you. I'm going to put it up against the line. And then we're going to fold the end over to the line. You might not be able to see my line because it's silver against on that. So that like that. So we're folding that over till it's on our line. I'm folding the end over to the silver line. So we've got those both folded. So now we want to mark for our magnetic snap. We're doing this in the lining piece. So that is the shorter one. So that's that one. So make sure it is the shorter one. And we want that to be 1 inch up from the bottom line. So this is the bottom. So I'm going to mark my centers so that we can get exactly where it is. I'll just fold that, I won't cut that. So 1 inch from there. And our center line is there. So we're putting the male portion here, but at this stage we're just cutting it, we're not fitting it. So I always suggest putting some Decavil light in behind. So we'll put that aside for now. So now we want to put our flap right sides together, lining up the sides and the bottom. So now we want to sew around this curve and around there and there, leaving the top piece open. So 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch. So now take some pinking shears or just clip into the curves around there and around here, just so that you get a nice turn on your curves. Snip your corners off. And I'm just going to snip that straight up there to get rid of some excess. So now we'll turn that through. Get your fingers or something in there to push that out with. Pieces are all still turned over. Now we want to top stitch around there at a generous 3 mil and come right down to the end. So that's our top stitching done like that. Now we want to get our snap. Now we're fitting the male portion to the lining where we just snipped our holes. Now I'm going to stick a piece of double-sided tape just over the prongs and not take the backing off, just to give that a bit of thickness. Put that aside for now because you'll need that shortly. I'm going to place a square of sticky tape just in the box. And I shall come back to that when that's dried. This is why you need to do all these things when you're supposed to, not when I get around to it. So we'll leave that and come back to that in a minute. Now we want our back and our sides. So that's our B1 and our C's. We're going to put those on either side, lining up the top and right down the side. And we're going to sew down each of those at 3/8 of an inch. Open those out. Now we actually want to butterfly those seams, so get them open. Now it's up to you whether you glue them open, whether you just press them open, or what you do with opening them, but we want those seams open. We want to draw a line 40 mil or 1.5 inches. It's 1.5 inches, like that, between these two. Now I'm not going to come right to the end, so we want to put some wide double-sided tape just above that, so up towards the top. Like, we don't want it past the side, like that. Then we want to take our flap. Now don't forget we've got our ends folded under. Take the double-sided tape off and centre this right side down in the middle. So our ends are turned under, remember, and it should be centered within the back and to the line. Then we want to draw 2 lines, 1/4 of an inch up from the edge of the flap and 1/2 an inch from the flap. Like that. So what we're going to do now is sew around there using the side seam at the side, and down there is a box around the flap. How dry is our handle? Okay, so our handle is dry. So let's draw a line at there, 1 inch. Take our double-sided tape off and sit that centered over that line like that. Flex that up and sit that again centered on the line like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew around here, down here and along, and then I'm going to just do the box because I'm going to put rivets in the middle. So I'm going to go and put a rivet in each of those. So you can, if you're not using rivets, you can draw, sew a X box over it. So I shall go put a rivet in each of those. So now we want to put our logo tag and our female portion of our magnetic snap. So the female portion is the one with the hollow, and we're giving instructions from the top. So I draw a line between my 2 center points, and that helps me know the center. And I'm not going to and cover the prongs at the back. So that is our tag and our female snap. So then we want to take our back, lie our front right sides together along the bottom edge, like that, and clip along there. And then we're going to sew down that seam allowance. Now you shouldn't be sewing on your deckable, you should be sewing next to it. Now you don't have to butterfly this seam. It does make it easier. You won't see it in the end because we're putting a base over it, but we want to open that seam up and sew down either side. Now I'm going to do it from this side because my tension is fine and you're not going to see this seam anyway. So that is all butterflied. Now I'm going to take a wide piece of double-sided tape. Now you don't need to do this, you can just stick it over the top. I just like to have it stuck firmly underneath. Then we want to get our base. Now we have put the deckable light on here. Now you don't have to use double-sided tape here at all, you can just fold it over and clip it, but I do like it to be nice and tight. So I'm going to put double-sided tape down the long edges. And we're going to fold this over firmly, so roll it over that edge, and that's the other reason I like to use double-sided tape. And give it a good push down. Now it's always good to have your centres marked, and if you haven't marked them, I don't like to fold my deckable heavy in half, but never mind, that'll come out. Okay. Okay. And line it up in the middle. So in the middle of those, so you're lining up the seam with your centre line on your base. And now we're going to sew right around the edge, or top stitch around the edge. So I start down the edge so I don't have a back stitch in the middle. So now we're going to put our bag feet in. So we are given measurements in the pattern as to where they should go. And it's all in relation to our centre line. So I'm going to continue my centre line through there. And we're going to come out an inch from our centre line. And 3 inches, so 3.5 from our centre line, which should be just next to our seam. Now if your top stitching is too close, then move it over so you're not having it anywhere near your top stitching. And again, put some tape on the back of our prongs. And there is our bag feet. So now we're going to bring our sides together. Now you might need to flex the base to do this. Like that, just to bring it together. Whoops. And this side too. So now we're going to sew down both of those sides at the allotted seam allowance. Now don't be scared to just squash your base down and keep it out of your way. You're not going to damage it. So again, these seams here have them butterflied. So you can either glue these open, you can tape them open, or you can just give them a good steam roll, but it is good to have them open. In fact, I'm going to glue mine. It's just something I've started doing with my seams on structured bags. So now this is where we want to push our bag down at the bottom and bring the end together. So you've got a centre seam and you've got a centre in your side piece. So just put a clip on the bottom. And then just squish your bag out like that. Now if the seam comes past it like that, just give it a bit of a clip off. And on that side as well. Same here. Push it down so that your seam there and your centre line are together. And we'll sew across this line here. Now I'm also going to sew, it against at the 3/8, and then I'm going to come this side by 1/8 of an inch and sew another seam. And that is for reinforcing. Now if you want to, you can trim these seams down just a little bit, don't over trim them. So that is our exterior all done. So we'll put that aside and we shall work on our lining. So we'll start with our slip pocket, our G1 and our G2. Now we want to put our linings right side together. And sew around those 3 edges, leaving the top flat, unsewn. We're going to do that at a 6mm. Now you can clip in tight to these corners, or you can just take pinking shears and just go around them like that. Just be mindful you don't cut your actual stitching. Then turn your pocket through the other way. I just push my thumb in there and give it a bit of a push out. Give that a bit of a tug at the sides, and we're going to baste down the top. Now if you've got any fraying bits along the top, just give those a bit of a trim off. Now we're going to take a bit of double-sided tape, put it down the middle of our trim, take the backing off, and we're going to sit this just shy of halfway onto the trim, yep. So that when we push it over like that, it comes over halfway. Now you do need to be quite firm about how tight you press it because you want it to stay down at the back and the front. Now if one is a little bit shorter, this side looks like it's a little bit shorter than the other side, I would sew from this side so that you can definitely be sure you're catching both. Now don't start stitching out here, start stitching on the pocket, and we're going to come along the edge of that trim with about a 2mm seam allowance. Now I just run my scissors right along the very edge of the pocket so that you don't cut the pocket itself. And trim the edges off. Now if you've got any long threads there, you might want to give them a little bit of a trim to seal that down. Get your F back lining. So you want, now if you want the pocket on the front, you would put it on the front. I like mine on the back. And we should have our centre marks marked. So we're going up 2 1/4 from the bottom and sew around it. Make sure you back stitch or back tack well at the beginning and the end, just so that your pocket doesn't come undone. Then we want to get our other lining, which is our front. Put those right sides together, and we want to sew down each side and the bottom. Now we do want to leave a big as opening as possible at the bottom for turning the bag through, and this lining is shaped, so do follow the direction. And I'm going to bring my edges up like that as I sew. So I back stitch there and turn this through or around to be in there. Because what you want to do now is just put our hand in there, and that brings those together. Now I'm just going to nest these, so one seam is going one way and one is the other. You can butterfly them or you can nest them and sew along that straight edge. Now on this I'm only doing the one seam, and the same with the other end. Now make sure that your bottom seam is nested the same way. And we're going to sew across that seam as well, like that. Now if you've used a thicker interfacing like I have, I suggest you snip that little bit just at the top and open that piece out, because it's going to get too thick at the top. If you've got a thin lining, it doesn't matter if it's just nested at the top. So you'd have that piece like that and open that little piece at the top. So that's our lining all complete. Now take our strap connectors, line them up with the end so that that seam that we drew is just under the edge. Now I know that's going to be very close to the seam, and that is the plan. So we just clip those in place so they're down in the bag, and the seam is about 1/4 inch under the top of the bag. So you've got about 3/8 sticking out the top. We can baste those in place, and then I turn my bag or my lining inside out. So we want our trim and our exterior. So now we want to make sure, I'm just going to tuck my flap into the bag, like that. And I'm going to put this 10mm past my centre point. Now I'm just checking this at the moment to make sure it fits. So we just want to go around our bag. Now don't pull it tight, but definitely don't have it loose. It's better to be a little bit firm, especially if it's got a bit of give, because my vinyl definitely does have a bit of give. Now you don't want to be using anything thick or rigid for this trim. The thin and flexible it is, the better. And a really thin vinyl or faux leather gives a really nice finish to the bag. And don't be tempted to make it bigger, because you want it to be the inch depth that it is, so that when it's folded it gives you a really nice small amount at the top. Now the only reason I get you to check this is because everybody's fabric and seams and everything can be a little bit different. Even if we all think we follow the same seam allowance, they can be different, and each fabric reacts differently, etc. So when I come to there, that is going to be perfect. So I'm going to take a 10mm seam allowance, and that is going to, see, that's overlapped by that amount, so that's perfect. So if you go like that and put your clip where your 10mm would be, you can see that's going to fit around the top really well. I know a couple of the testers found it fitted perfectly, a couple found that it was too long, and one found it was a slightly bit short. So it just comes back to what you have used. So now we want to take our trim, put it right sides together, and just sew down that edge with a 10mm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to open that up and bring it together so it's wrong sides together there, and just clip that together. So then we want to just clip all the way around. Now it's up to you whether you clip it or whether you just sew around it. I'm just going to sew around it. Now I do all of this, the next few steps I do with a really long stitch. So I've got it up to about nearly a 6. The reason I'm doing that is I don't want too many holes in my vinyl. Now we're going to fold it right on the seam so that we can get a mark there. Then bring our seams together so that we can mark all our quarters. So now we want to get our lining. Put it over the top. Line up the centre points at the back. Now if you've got your pocket on the front, just be aware of where your pocket is. Line up centre lines at the front. Now your centre line might be a little bit off because the front is shaped more than the back. So if you just give that a bit of a, that's all right, it's going to fit. And put a clip either side of your strap connector. Now I get you to sew it to the lining because it's much easier than manipulating the exterior. We are going to sew it around the exterior soon, but it's much easier to sew that as little as possible because it's quite a tight little sew. So as you see, that should come to so that our strap connector is just above our trim. So now we want to sew around the top. Now I'm going to sew that with just less than 6mm or just less than 1/4 of an inch. And this is easier because you can just squash it down, it's just your lining. Now make sure your trim and your edge stay level. So don't be tempted to cut these, they are to give a little bit of extra support to the strap connectors. So that is your lining with your trim and strap connectors attached. What we want to do with that now is put it inside our bag. So I'm going to put it inside my bag with the lining, with the pocket at the back and the flap down in the bag. Like that. Now on the small size, I know this is really tight to get around here. That's why I ask that you be really careful with your choices of fabric. Now I'm going to be sewing this from the inside. Make sure your strap connector is centered on your center point on the sides. You can see the center mark on your trim or one of your, so just line that up. Line up the center. So make sure the top of your trim is lined up with the top of your exterior. Now this corner is going to be quite a tight turn when you're sewing, so don't be afraid to squish down your bag and squish down the base. If you're on a domestic, I suggest taking the side off your machine and using it to with your free arm, or if you're on a cylinder arm, it's obviously going to be easier. But we can do it on a flatbed. We just have to be a little bit rough with our bag, but we can do it. So now we're going to sew around the inside. Now I'm going to start on a corner, and what I do is I fold my bag over like that. And I know it looks rough, but it makes it much easier. Now we're going to sew this at a generous 6mm. So it's a matter of changing the shape of your bag as you go around. Now I have been told some prefer to do it from the outside and go around like that. And so whatever works for you. So rather than trimming along this front, because for the top stitch it makes it actually much easier if you've got an edge, just cut a couple of small V's through all the layers around the curve. Doesn't matter so much at the back because it's flat. So just along the curve at the front. So now we get to turn our bag inside out. Now yes, this can be a hard turn if you've used something thicker. Now I have obviously used a vinyl and Decavil, which I prefer to use foam or fleece, but I know many prefer something more structured like the Decavil. So I'm just showing you that it can be done. So just push your corners into your hand like that. And then just start working those through like that. And then we have to get it out of our lining. So as you can see, mine is all very battered and bruised, but that's okay. That's the reason I use this fabric, because I want to show you how we can fix that. I'm just going to give that a bit of a rub off. Make sure all the corners are out, which they are. Just going to put my flap down at the back so I can pull up my trim and put my lining down inside. So just keep rolling around and getting that down as tight as you can. So what we're going to do is clip around the top. Now I am going to top stitch from the inside. Now if these here are quite thick, you might want to get a hammer and give that a bit of a hammer before you try stitching around it. Do use a bigger needle if you need to, and make sure that the flap is kept down at the back. Now this is where it shows if you have your hair flap too high, because it is going to get in your way when you're top stitching. Now some don't like to top stitch around a bag that's got trim on it like that. Personally I quite like it top stitch, so I'm definitely going to top stitch mine. Okay, so now I'm going to top stitch around there from the inside. So we're doing this at a 3mm. I'm going to use a piece of vinyl as a hump jumper in behind as we come over the strap connector. And that is our top stitch. I pull my threads through, and then I will feed them through inside of the bag. Now you can back stitch if you wish. So I just pull those through one of the holes and into the back space into the lining, pull them tight, and then I tie them off. Okay, so there is our top stitching all done. So I'm going to get a blow over in a minute and give this a good heat and flatten it all out. So that is our bag. I've heated it and got the creases out. Mind you, this is kind of a vinyl that has sort of crease lines in it anyway. So now we want to reach inside, take our lining. Now you can either do this by hand or you can do it on the machine. It's entirely up to you. I'll sew along there with the black thread. But I'm going to go right along that bottom seam so that it looks like it's intentional. So that's our lining all complete. Let's push that down in the bag. So as you can see, the lining fits nice and snug. Now, let's put our strap on. So I have done a short shoulder strap for this one, and the measurements are in the pattern for the shoulder strap. Now you can do a crossbody strap or you can do any kind of strap you want. I want this bag to pretty much be able to be used with the handle and without the strap. So that's why I've designed it with the very thin strap. Now I'm using these little ring ones, and you just fold that over and put a rivet in there like that. Make sure it's going the same way. Just fold it over and put a rivet in it. And there is our strap all done. Now you can take that higher and use 2 rivets if you're using thinner fabric and don't want it to, or want to just ensure that it's not going to come out. And so the strap is designed to just be inconspicuous on the bag. So that is our medium with the sew-on handle. So I have, rather than turning it, I have done the, and then we have the small. And as you can see, it is very small. But that is perfect for a carry bag or just a double bag to put on top of your tote bag. Definitely prefer to have the pop-up handle because it's so much finer than having the chunky handle on the top. But you can have either handle on either bag. That is our flat version of our Alla-Jay. So I hope you have lots of fun making yours, and please do share them because we love to see what you do with our patterns.